Well, ask me questions about them.
Don't turn that dial. Don't turn that station. If you do, you're going to miss a really, really good show because we have as our guest Paul Caprio, who's Executive Director of Family Pack. That is the leading family values organization in the state of Illinois, maybe in the country. Paul's been doing this kind of advocacy work for 30 years, okay? He's been director of Family Pack for 20 years. You're going to find all about same-sex marriage. Is it really a great thing? Is it really as good as the media told you? Did the mainstream media really do a good job? Did WTTW, did they give balance to both sides? I don't think so. Don't turn that dial or you're going to miss a really, 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 really good show. You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name and politics is our game. And we will be doing lots of politics and public policy this evening because, as I said, we have as our guest Paul Caprio. He's the Executive Director of Family Pack. Paul's going to tell us right from the bat what you didn't hear about same-sex marriage because everybody told you, if you watch the mainstream media, if you watch 2, 5, and 7, if you listen to Carol Marine on Channel 11, you know when the day the same-sex legislation passed, there they were with Representative Harris, who was the sponsor, and their little report from David McKinney, and that was it. You would have thought it was like a unanimous vote. No, there were 54 people in the state legislature, in the state house, who voted against it. Why didn't one of those people come on Chicago tonight to talk about it? Well, we can't correct all the ills, but we can correct some, and so right now, Paul Caprio, Executive Director of Family Pack. Paul, why would you be against same-sex marriage? It's got to be good for everybody. The mainstream media has said so. I mean, shouldn't you just pack up your bags and go? You've lost, okay? It's over, and join hands and say you're now for same-sex marriage, right?
Right. Well, you know, the media around here doesn't always get it right. I mean, for example, they all endorsed Rod Blagojevich for governor of Illinois, didn't they? Relative to marriage, though, as you know, traditional marriage between a man and a woman, which the two people who are able to procreate a child, has been the foundation of Western civilization for 2,000 years, and actually most civilization for about 6,000 years. We believe that the concept of legalizing same-sex marriage, marriage between two people of the same gender, does not serve the purposes of protecting children adequately in the state of Illinois.
Is that what it's about? Are you about protecting children? And if you were convinced that same-sex marriage would be a way of protecting children, enhancing their lives, would you then say you're okay, you're for it?
No, well, no, I wouldn't, because in addition to that, there's a serious issue of religious freedom, especially what is encapsulated in this particular bill.
Aren't there exemptions for religious institutions? I think, wouldn't Tom Cross tell you that? Leader Tom Cross, he was the leader of the Republican, his state leader. He was the Republican leader of the state house. He's now stepped down. He was replaced by Jim Durkin. But when he was leader, he was telling you he would vote against same-sex marriage. Wasn't that right?
Yes, I would. Yes, that's right. Tom Cross told me he was voting against same-sex marriage.
Tom is now running for state treasurer. So if you're Tom, okay, and if you have no principles whatsoever, I'm not saying, I'm just saying if, okay, then you're Tom and you say, well, if I'm a Republican leader, I can't vote against I have to vote against same-sex marriage because my caucus did. I mean, there are 47 members in the Republican caucus in the state house, and 44 voted against, right?
That's correct.
3 voted. So he couldn't lead the caucus and vote. So there he was going to vote against. But then he was going to run for state treasurer, and he's got a primary. Bob Grogan, is running against him in the Republican primary. He's the DuPage County auditor. And so Tom says, but you know, he's a little guy. See, in the world of Tom Cross, there are big people. Like once I wanted to interview Tom. Never I got to interview because I was a little guy. And if you're a little guy, and I am a little guy, seriously, I understand. Good man has to know his limitations. So, meaning I don't have a lot of money to give him, and even if I did, I couldn't because I'm a journalist. Unlike some journalists.
Well, you're big in spirit.
I've got lots of spirit. So Tom never came on this show, and Tom pays attention to the big guys, and he thinks as running as state treasurer, he's going to win easily the Republican primary. So his eye is on the prize of the general election. He's running against, you know the guy's name, the Democrat? I can't even.
Michael Friedrichs.
And Friedrichs was going to
Danville.
make a big thing if he voted against same-sex marriage in the general election. So Tom, I'm just saying, if he had no principles, Tom, I'm not saying you have no principles, but if he had, you would do the calculus and say, oh, primary is not a problem, general election is, I better vote for same-sex marriage. And how did he vote? Folks, he voted for same-sex marriage, one of the 3 Republicans. Did I get that right?
I think you got it right, and you know
I hope I wasn't being too cynical, Tom, because, you know, I try to be fair, but I think, I've said that now to several people in the mainstream media. They don't want to say it, but they said, you know, Jeff, you got it right. I do know politics because I'm now studying it at the Institute of Politics, David Axelrod's organization at the University of Chicago. It's an excellent program. More about that another time, okay? But it's an excellent program, and seriously, what better way to learn politics than at the University of Chicago Institute of Politics? And all kidding aside, they're running a very balanced program. Steve Edwards, who you know from Be Easy, is there, you know, with Axelrod, with others. It's an excellent program. Little plug for the Institute of Politics. And they have many free programs, basically for undergrads, but every member of the public can go there and virtually all free. I better give you a chance to say, well, we don't want to spend the whole show on crusts, but so the main thing is what people are wondering from you. You've given an argument why you don't think same-sex marriage is that hot. You were one of many people opposing the legislation in the State House. It passed the State Senate. They're having trouble passing it in the State House. The Republicans were pretty much standing against it. There were some Democrats who were against it, was it like about a dozen or so? And so they really needed, Madigan didn't want to push a few Democrats. He might have gotten a few votes. He did get a few. So he needed 2 more, and he went to the Republicans. And leader Tom Cross gave him one of the 2 votes he would need, along with Ed Sullivan, right? State Rep.
and Ron Sandak.
And Ron Sandak. So 3, it put him like, that gave him 61. He only needed 60. Put him 1 over the margin. So nobody could say you cast the, you know, the winning vote of those 3 Republicans because they were 1 over. These guys are so smart. You got to give them that. Really, they're smart. The 3 Republicans and Madigan. I mean, they know how to play this game, don't they? Oh, I thought it was all about the highfalutin, this is the moral issue of the day. Okay, I know I'm talking too much, but one last thing. Here's the thing, folks. I'm whispering because I don't want to get out. I hear that one reason why Mac Madigan did this was not because he woke up and just said, oh, as Speaker, I have to do the right thing. He was hearing that money was being held back, and maybe some of his members might not get elected, and if enough of that happened, he wouldn't be Speaker of the State House. So the threat of some big money donors to the Democratic Party, some of whom may have been gay, the threat of losing that caused Mike Madigan to get in there and get 2 or 3 votes, Republicans or otherwise. Would that be right? Would that be right?
There's no question that unlike in May, when the bill was not called, this time the Speaker was very proactive on behalf of this legislation.
And Carol Marin said that right on Channel 11. She was there the night it passed. He said, Speaker Mike Madigan did that because he was getting pressure, the money, he was going to lose money. Oh, she didn't say that. Why wouldn't she say that? Carol, want to come in and tell us? Why wouldn't she say that?
Excuse me, he said that to several of his members.
Speaker Mike said that.
Yeah, I don't think it's a matter of conjecture. He told several of his members.
But did Carol Marin say that? Did Carol Marin get on and say Speaker Mike Madigan got involved because he cared about his members, because he wanted to make sure he stayed Speaker, and that's why same-sex marriage is the law of the land in the state of Illinois, because the big money donors were going to hold money back from Speaker Mike. Do you think Carol Marin said that?
No, but I also know that in May she was up in his balcony at the state capitol
Mike Madigan's balcony?
predicting, yeah, well, his box, his special
She gets to sit in his box.
seats.
See, if you're a big guy, even if you're a
predicting
woman,
that
you
within
get to do
several
this.
hours the bill was going to be passed. So my point being, present company excluded, people should really not believe often what the unison cry of the Chicago liberal media is.
If Paris Schutz, Paris is like, how old are you? Paris is like 26 or something? He's got all that wisdom, Paul. I mean, if you're 26, don't you think that's, I said to TTW once, shouldn't you have somebody who knows economics here? You know what the head of programming said to me? He said, why would we want that? Do they have one person who's taken one class in economics working on the WTTW staff? That's my challenge. Do you think?
I have no idea what the educational background is.
No, they don't. Because why would they want somebody who knows economics? Because, you know, the important thing, if you go to TTW, and I love the place because I'm on the community advisory board, there's there's no fighting because it's such a unanimous opinion. Like if the staff were to sit down at lunch, do you think there's a Republican in that crowd? Maybe somebody who voted for like John Lindsay back 40 years ago. Remember John Lindsay? That kind of Republican.
Was he a Republican?
He was.
Oh,
a moderate Republican.
I completely forgot.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so enough about TTW. We're back to Paul Caprio. Paul, so you've said it's about protecting children, and you don't think same-sex marriage is so protective of kids. And everybody wants to protect kids, and yet the majority, certainly the vast majority of Democrats voted for that. 3 Republicans, Tom Cross, Ed Sullivan, and Ron Sandak. So those 3 joined all those Democrats. It must be a good cause, because could Tom Cross be, he's running for state treasurer, he wouldn't want to be anti-kid, would he?
Well, I think the question...
So you have to have
Jeff,
a certain je ne sais quoi if you do the show, and you have to see how many times in the show can I say je ne sais quoi, and how many times can I say Tom Cross. Now, Tom Cross has got the lead like 12 times already,
Yeah.
and je ne sais quoi only twice, so I'm going to have to play catch-up here.
Well, what I'm saying is we have to say, what is the primary role of the state relative to the institution of marriage? And what I've said in the past is simply this. The primary role of the state, it's not about sanctioning the love of 2 people. I mean, after all, you know, 2 13-year-old people could be in love too, but they're not qualified to be married in the state of Illinois. So the issue for the state is, how do we best protect children?
Okay, but what's the
not
nexus?
how do we procreate them. Once they are procreated, how do we protect them? Because if they're not protected in a loving home with a mother and a father who they know, then it falls upon the state through adoption, foster care, etc., to protect them.
Now, let's be fair. So I was going after Cross and Carol Marine because I don't think they're, you know, Cross didn't seem to have some principles. Carol Marine and TTW doesn't seem to have balance. Now, if you're going to be a good journalist, I can't give you a pass. So I've given you an opportunity to make some points. But now I'm sitting here thinking, you just said it's important. You want this kid to have 2 loving parents, but you said a man and a woman. Why couldn't 2 loving women who were married to each other, now they can do it under the state of Illinois, who care deeply about a child, why couldn't they raise? I know lesbians, I know gay men. They're quite reasonable, they're quite nice, they're quite responsible. Why couldn't they be loving parents that could better raise this child than, say, taking him to a home with foster kids, or maybe he's in a home without any parents? So even if you were right, and I know you might say there's empirical evidence that a man and a woman do a best job, not just a man and woman, but the biological parents, who are a man and a woman, do the best job of raising the kid. If they're not available for some reason, and you have 2 loving women or 2 loving men who are financially, emotionally, psychologically responsible people, why couldn't they raise that child?
Well,
in a loving way that would satisfy you.
Justice Alito, when the case came up before the Supreme Court, said same-sex marriage is newer than cell phones. And what that means is we don't have any evidence to establish a radical change in the basic social foundation of this society. And I'd like to point out, a very extensive study was done by Mr. Regnerus down at the University of Texas, and it shows this, that where he compares children who are out of a two-parent, mother and father family versus a number of situations, people who are out of a lesbian union, out of a homosexual union, adoption, I mean, he throws all these different things in, foster care, and he comes to the conclusion that in terms of the social ills which are created, drug addiction, unemployment, a whole variety of different things, which the state, of course, then has to step in and try to develop
But this is
programs.
only one study that you're referring to. Where was it published?
University of Texas.
No, but is it like a journal, or is it a textbook?
Yeah, it was actually published, I believe, by the Harvard Press.
As a book,
And it was,
as a monograph,
yeah.
but not in so-called referee journal where some editor has looked at it and said, this passes scholarly standards.
Well, there was a comprehensive investigation because of some of the criticism
When was it
from the
published?
homosexual community about a year ago.
And so its data were
It's relatively
recent?
new.
It was using recent data?
Yeah.
Are there studies that go the other way?
Well,
Because in most scientific things, there are some studies going one way.
you
some
see,
studies going the other way.
here's the problem with studies. When this bill was brought up in Springfield, there was a lesbian couple there with a beautiful little 4-year-old boy, and they were raising this boy, and he seemed to be very happy.
Right.
We don't know what the effects upon that relationship is going to be psychologically on that child until maybe he's 15, 20, 25 years old. And that's what justice...
Why would you suspect, why would you presume there'd be some negative effects of that relationship on the child?
Well, do you think there's a difference between, say, the way a 5-year-old boy or girl act toward their parental environment as opposed to the way they may act when they're 18, 20, or 25?
But
I
Paul,
think they
part
raise a
the-
lot
just
of
be fair.
additional questions,
But part of
Jeff.
that, part of that's set by how things are accepted. We're now moving toward a society where two gay women, two gay men are much more accepted. You know, most of the younger people under 30, I think, are very much in favor of same-sex marriage. In their view, if you talk to some of these people, and I have, they would say, you know, it's not an issue. If I have a kid and he wants to play with somebody else who's got two moms or two dads, I'm fine with that. I've talked to these people that say that. This is a new way of looking at things. It may not be your way, it may not be somebody else's way, but what I'm saying is it's two gay women raising a child, two gay women living together. They're much more accepted
Are these young
now.
people you're talking about, are they experts in family?
Well,
Are they married even?
Yes, the people I've
Yeah.
talked to are married, and yeah, they have kids. And all I'm saying, Paul, you can't refute this. I mean, I don't think you can.
I can.
That the great majority of people under 30 favor same-sex marriage and take a much more open attitude toward accepting gays, accepting lesbians to be their friends, to be their social friends, their professional friends. This has happened. Now, you may not like it, but I think it would be hard to argue if you look at the demographics of young people and how they feel. Now, older people still are not sold on this as much. And now the Republican Party, something you know something about, and this is in favor of Tom Cross, you know, so we knock some things, we give some, it's called balance, folks. Take a contrarian attitude. It's what journalism is supposed to be. Present all viewpoints, challenge people. Are you listening, you folks, you young guys and women at TTW? Because if you really want to learn how to be a journalist, I think they should really study at the feet of somebody who wants to take a contrary view. So that's my point, is that it's much more of an open question, I think. Now, I understand you're in advocacy, you're representing constituents, you have to go out there and represent them as best you can, and there's nothing wrong with that. But as a journalist, I'm not representing anybody, my viewers, I guess, mainly. I want to make sure they get, that's why you're here, Paul. I don't think you got a good shot at this, and I'm trying to make sure my viewers get to see the other point of view. But you've got to deal with this stuff. If you're in, my point is getting back to the Republican Party, they're looking at it and they're saying, you know, look, who are our voters? They're sort of older, they're this or that. We've got to crack into younger votes. We've got to crack into African American votes. We have to crack into Hispanic votes.
Well, first of all, looking at this strictly...
You've heard this argument.
Of course. But looking at this strictly from a political point of view, which is not primarily where I'm coming from, but looking at it from that point of view, look, first of all, attitudes change, but you know, parties have to stand for something, and it's called a platform. The Republicans put forward a platform in Tampa. They put forward a platform.
The National
here.
Party.
Yes, the National Party and the State Party here
Has a platform.
in Illinois put forward a platform last year.
Where?
And they, I think
Harlanville
they were in Tinley Park.
Tinley
if
Park,
you know the
okay.
truth.
Okay.
I wasn't at their convention,
Okay,
but
so
I'm
they have a
aware of their
platform that says what?
And the platform comes out in favor of traditional marriage between a man and a woman. Okay, that's what they have in their planks. Now, you know, you can't expand a party if the party stands for nothing.
Well, when you say some, the fact that it's in that platform doesn't mean that no, remember, wasn't it Reagan who said, if you agree with me 80% of the time, you're my friend?
Yes.
So even Reagan would say, if you disagree with this plank, but you agree with 80% of what's here, you're my friend, you're a Republican, right?
Well, except that
You're not gonna challenge
you've got the reverse of the truth, because what I would say it this way: the Republican Party has been inviting to homosexuals and lesbians. They have something called Log Cabin Republicans. They have Go Pride.
Right.
Okay, so those are people who, let's say, they do support same-sex marriage, but they also support the Republicans, let's say, on economics,
Right.
on this
That's my
issue, on
point,
that
my
issue.
point.
So that's the 80%.
Okay, it's a
You
big
don't-
tent.
you don't-
But your tent can include these people who are with Republicans on less spending,
Yeah.
less taxes, less regulation, and now
You
we only
don't, you don't trade it that way, because the conservative base, which is made up to a great extent of Christians, pro-life Catholics in the Republican Party, says no. And you don't throw away your base.
We're not throwing it away. We're just recognizing there's differences of opinion.
Well, you're saying you're not throwing it away. I think that since this is a fundamental issue with many people in the base of the Republican Party, they would say the Republican Party has forgotten them.
I apologize. We've got about 7 minutes left by my count. And so
By the way, I think the state chairman of the Republican Party should be held responsible for backing the platform of the party. And if he doesn't, as Pat Brady didn't, I think he should have resigned.
Well, you're saying Dorgan doesn't?
I have no idea of what Dorgan's
So you're talking
position
about
is.
Brady who did the right
No,
thing
I'm
to
talking
resign?
about Brady.
To
Yeah.
resign. Okay, but 7 minutes left now. And the question is sort of, where does the party go from here? Now, you're representing, you're executive director of Family PAC, which has views you're trying to advance, but you're also, you know, you've done consulting for Bill Buckley when he was alive over the years. You've worked in Phil Crane's office, right? You know the world of politics. You try to help some people get elected or unelected if you don't like them. You worked with the African American caucus that was trying to, you know, make sure their conservative social views were represented by their representatives when they often weren't. So you know politics. That's my point. Now, should the Republican Party now, having lost this, and they prepare for the election, okay, the 2014 election, and there are 4 candidates, Republican candidates out there. Maybe we can get that up, maybe not. Dillard, Brady, Rutherford, and Rauner. And as we're taping this show on November 10th, the Democratic Party seems to have one candidate, Governor Pat Quinn, and now he's formed a ticket with Paul Vallis, our good friend Paul Vallis, and we hope he'll come back because Paul's done this show many times, at which time 4 years ago he said he was more Republican than a Democrat. So we'll want to follow up with Paul on that, because he told me that as he sat in your chair. Is he now more a Democrat?
Maybe it's a
than Republican?
bipartisan ticket. How do you know?
He could be. And Paul's a great guy. You know, he just is. Paul, I have enormous respect for. So we hope he'll come back and talk about that. But my point is, as now we've sort of set the table, we've got 4 Republicans running in this primary, should they now try to focus, they're being advised, focus on the economic issues. John Tillman said 3 big things. State employee, he's chairman of the Illinois Policy Institute, state employee pension reform we need, Medicaid reform, education reform, school vouchers, school choice, you're for that. You're with John Tillman, I'm sure, on that. Okay? So rally the party, look at those 4 candidates, find the best one to push on the economic issues, because that's the driving force in the general election campaign. Have I said anything that you disagree with?
No, because I think those issues, those are the driving force issues. However, those issues alone do not create a winning political coalition.
Really?
Yes, because the Republican Party was a permanent minority party until a governor of California named Ronald Reagan came along and he said, let's invite the social conservatives into this party and let's take a position on these issues. And
they were one leg of that 3-legged stool.
They were one leg.
Social conservatives, what were the 2 other legs, Paul?
The other legs were national security and economic.
Okay. You're in sync with the party. I think there are many of those financial guys.
Listen, nobody's gone out and said,
Okay.
you have to make pro-life the #1 issue of your campaign. You've got to make this or that.
So you're with them.
The issue.
You're with Ron Gidwitz. You're with all those guys, the money guys.
No, I'm not with Ron Gidwitz at all.
Isn't Ron saying that, the 3-legged stool?
Ron Gidwitz.
Bruce Rauner, 3-legged stool?
And I hope I'm not putting words in anyone's mouth. I think that people like that feel that the social issues are a terrible liability for Republicans, and therefore they say, just don't talk about any of those issues.
Well, could you just
the problem with that is voters want to know.
What if they say minimize it, talk about it, reassure the base you're still concerned, but as you go out, get ready for the general election, emphasize those 2 other legs of the stool. Don't run away from it. Say you're pro-life. Defend those views if that's your view. If you're not, if you're pro-choice. But say everybody in the Republican Party and the independents and the Democrats has to recognize the terrible economic shape of this state, and let's focus on that.
You see,
again, have I said anything there you disagree with?
Well, let me clarify what you just said. When you say
I should run
that,
for governor, maybe. No,
when you say that, and don't, in other words, you're saying don't talk about social issues at all. Well, social issues
I didn't say
come
don't
up.
talk about it. I said just don't keep your eye on the other issues. Acknowledge the importance of those social issues. Acknowledge the importance of the social conservatives for the base. But as you talk to Democrats, as you talk to independents, don't lead with your chin. Lead with your strength. You see my point?
Because you also, in an election, to elect Republicans across this state, in many, many districts, you have to energize that base. And to energize that base, you're not silent on these issues.
Yeah, you have to give.
You have to communicate with them.
You got to give that base some red meat.
And let them know where you are on the issues.
Yeah, and I'm saying do that, just not to the exclusion of these other issues. Keep the focus there. Don't run away from these. I'm just saying, if you had to say it's like 70, 30, 80, 20, because most of the state of Illinois wants to hear about the economic issues. This base of the Republican Party wants to hear about those issues. Give them the red meat, but go out and talk about, the Illinois has the highest unemployment, second highest unemployment rate in the country, has a mess on state employee pensions. 1 out of every 5 black kids, only 1 out of every 5 black kids at CPS reads at grade level. Those are the things how you convert Democrats to Republican voters. You see the point?
Well, as I said, you've got a voter coalition. Very few Republicans are not elected in the way that I just suggested. I loosely call it the Reagan coalition.
That 3-legged stool.
Voters. And I grant you, Mark Kirk is not elected by that coalition. But Mark Kirk is one of about 3 or 4 Republican senators in the Senate who's not elected that way.
Well, when he first ran, a lot of people wouldn't know this. When he came on this show, we're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank our guest, Paul Caprio. Paul, thanks so much
Thank you,
for
Jeff.
coming. He is, folks, he is the executive director of Family PAC. You can find out more about them by going to family-pac.org.